Do you have a need to protect the margin, i.e. the profitability of every sales order that is input in your organization? If so, then stick around for this recording where we are going to show you a couple of ways of achieving exactly that. To implement methods that are going to prevent sales orders with a below acceptable margin to be sent out to your customers. This recording is going to be slightly different to what we usually do on the channel in that we are going to have a special guest with us in today's recording. So if you want to find out more, stick around and watch the rest. Okay, welcome everyone back for another recording today. Today is a bit of a special occasion because I am joined by my good friend Harshad, which I have mentioned once or twice in my previous recordings. Harshad is a very good friend of mine, a colleague, a brother in arms. We've done several assignments together. And as I said in the introduction, we were recently involved in a customer engagement where Harshad was priming and I was trying to ably assist him. And the customer had the following concern, which was that they wanted to have a method to be able to control and protect the margin on the sales orders that their internal sales reps were creating. So just like developers have hackathons, Harshad and I, in our own little corner of the world, went to a solution-a-thon, if that's what I can call it, and we both came up with different solutions to try and tackle this particular issue that this customer was facing. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Harshad, and he is going to walk us through the solution that he proposed, what his thought process was, and we'll dive into the details as well of technically what it is that you need to do to set it up in the SAP S/4HANA Cloud system. So Harshad, without further ado, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Pascal. So when we were speaking to the customer, what we realized was customer was looking to reduce the low value sales order or the low margin sales order. When the sales representative creates them, they wanted to control those with the very reason that they want to control the margin that they achieve on every sales order that is created. We came up with two different approaches, as Pascal mentioned earlier. What I'm going to show you is how it works with SAP workflow, which has been configured for the sales order in this case. Let's start from creating a sales order, which is an internal sales representative role. And let's see how it works in action with the SAP workflow for sales documents. What I'm going to do here is select the order type, put my discount customer who likes lots of discounts, and the discount reference. Let's go and add an item onto the order and the quantity required. Now, as you can see here on the right hand side, the net value of the order is $350. Let's quickly check what is the margin on this particular order. At this point in time, the margin is 94%. So without any issues, it should go through. We are making a lot of money on this particular sales order. And let's try and save the order or create the order, and we'll see there's no blockage. There is no issue in terms of delivering this order further. If we quickly check the approval status in this particular case is not relevant. What I'm going to show you now is I'll edit the same order, reduce the margin that we are making on this particular order, and see how it changes the way the order behaves. Let's go to the item pricing once again. And at this point in time, let's add a discount condition. Now, as you are aware, we have some discount conditions configured. I'm going to use discount condition, which is percentage net amount, and quickly add it on the sales order. Let's add a discount of 93%, which brings us to the margin of 16.73%. What we expect in this case is the sales order should go through the approval workflow, which will ensure that the manager can request the internal sales representative to relook at the discount and ensure that we do not sell things on a low margin. Now, as you can see, the difference here is we have got an additional button here which shows withdraw approval request, which also means is this sales order has gone through the workflow process. The other change you will see here is the approval status for this particular sales order. Now this has gone into an approval status. So what we have just seen in last 2 minutes or so is how we can control based on the margin that we are making on a sales order, whether it should go through a workflow approval process or it should not. So that is the quick thing that can be configured in System Pascal, which will help customers to ensure that they control the low margin sales orders.
Well, that's, I think, a great solution, but maybe just to unpack this and try to understand what you've set up, because there's a lot of things here. So obviously there's workflow that is involved.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that somewhere you've put in something, some logic to say how you want to control what the minimum margin is allowed to be. So can you maybe walk us through and explain what it is behind the scenes that you've set up to make this process, this solution work the way it has?
Sure. Let's look at the configuration that can be done to achieve the outcome that we have seen just now. Now, in terms of workflow settings, as many of you might know, that we require to set up the workflow, we require the reasons to be set up in manage your solutions, or reasons to be configured. What are the reasons for which you want to stop or for which you need to trigger the workflow? We also have custom logic and the examples that are provided for that custom logic to trigger those reasons for particular set. And then what we have done to calculate the margin, we have added some additional custom logic, which ensures that for every sales order, we look at the header level, how much margin are we making, and then stop the sales order from going through directly. To ensure that we get the cost price at the header level, what we have done is we have changed the pricing procedure a bit to calculate the cost price at the header level. Now, let me show you what we have done in terms of setting up the reasons for workflow approval. So as a first step, you would go to configure your solution, and within configure your solution, you look for reasons for sales. As you can see here, we can define the reasons for approval request, and we can assign those reasons for approval request. What we have quickly done here is define reason ZOR1 for sales document, which says it requires an approval. So it is just a new reason which can be quickly configured by clicking on new reason, put your reason code and the description. As a next step, what we can do is we can assign the newly defined reason for the approval request. So what can be as well configured now, if you see here, what we have is for a sales order, that approval reason which was earlier defined, ZOR1, has been assigned. Similarly, like we created ZOR2, we can assign that and configure that as a second reason if required. Now that these reasons are set up, what we can do is we can go and create the custom logic. Now, before I go to the custom logic, since I am here in manage your solution already, I'm going to show you what is the change that I've made in pricing procedure, which enables us to calculate the cost at the header level. Let's go to the pricing procedure. And let's look at it only from sales perspective. So I had my custom pricing procedure already defined. And what I'm going to show you, what are the changes that I performed to ensure that it works from a workflow or cost calculation perspective. So as you can see, SO margin calculation is the pricing procedure that was defined. Let's drill down and see what is the difference here. Now, normally you would not have a subtotal at a profit margin level that is being passed on to KOMP field, the table. What I've done here is I've passed this on to this, I've passed this entry of margin into the subtotal so that we can read it in the paddy that we are going to see in the next step. The second change I've made here is I've used the margin in terms of, rather than using the value, I'm looking at the contribution margin in terms of percentage, which makes it simple for a user to even look at it and say, what is the percentage of margin that is being made on this particular sales order? So these are the two minor changes that we have done in order to achieve what we want to achieve in the workflow. Having seen this,
I don't want to steal your thunder, but the alternate calculation 18 is also part of the standard, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, Pascal. Thank you. Thanks for reminding. Now let's see what we have changed in the custom logic and what we are doing to ensure that the workflow is triggered only for the orders where we do not achieve the 20% margin, which has been hard-coded currently in the custom logic. So given that I already have created the sales document approval reason, I'm not going to create it, but just to give you a quick glimpse of where it is, if you go to the sales document, and within sales document, if you look for set approval reasons for sales document, you can define your own implementation where you can set up reasons for approval of sales documents. And these are not restricted to sales orders only. These are credit memos, debit memos, quotations, so on and so forth. Let's quickly go through the logic that we have written to ensure that every order below 20% is going through the workflow approval. Now, as you would be already aware, SAP provides you an example implementation. And what you can see in this example implementation is 3 examples where a sales order which has been created for a particular sales organization, approval reason is set for that. The second example is where a sales quotation that has been created for a customer classification, a particular customer classification, in this particular case, customer classification A, goes through an approval process. And the third example is where a sales order created for a customer payment term, as a particular payment term, goes through an approval. Now, rather than looking at it, let's look at what we have done to achieve what we just saw a few minutes ago. I'm going to create a draft and walk you through the custom logic that we have written here to ensure we show you or to showcase what we have done here. Now, as we discussed earlier, what we did was we passed on the custom field, we passed on the subtotal value into the calculation so that we can read that. And if you look at the sales document item level, what we have here is subtotal field, which allows us to read through that and calculate the total cost. Now, this loop here, what we are doing is we are calculating the total cost at the header level. So what we have just seen is one line item of the sales order. But if you imagine there are 100 line items, it will go through each of that line item and calculate the total cost, look at the net value of the sales order, and then define, calculate whether a 20% margin in this case has been maintained or not maintained. If we look at the total cost, so we loop that, then we go through and check if the total net amount is greater than 0, total cost is greater than 0. If yes, look at the margin, calculate that margin on basis of what the total cost is, which has been calculated earlier. and divided by the total net amount of the sales order. If this margin is less than 20%, we set an approval reason, which will automatically trigger the workflow. Now, I won't go through the workflow settings at this moment, but this is how you can achieve the workflow configuration or the low margin sales order workflow easily. Here, I have done some hard coding, but Pascal will show you how this can be how this can be done flexibly with a custom business object later in the video.
Hey, Harshad, I just want to pause there for a second. So just to make sure I understand correctly, so what you've done there is actually it's quite powerful because you could potentially cycle through a sales order that has got, let's say, 100 items, and then you are at the header level rebuilding or recalculating the total cost of each item into one aggregated amount. Same thing for the net amount, which then allows you to do that comparison at the header level. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
That's correct. That's correct. Absolutely correct, Pascal.
And I can also see that obviously you're looking at the cost of the item as well as the net amount. Could you potentially have, I don't know, added another pricing aspect, such as maybe excluded a discount or included, the VAT? You could have built up that comparison yourself the way you wanted to?
Yes, so the way it works is all the pricing that we have in these subtotals, and we can use any of these subtotals to add logic that we want. We can customize it to remove the, let's say, tax in this case, VAT or GST. In case of some countries, we can remove that easily.
Right. So that's quite a powerful way of doing it.
But that is it. It's a simple implementation. And subsequently, what you can do is you can go to manage sales document workflow. And here, workflow for sales order. You can define your new workflow, which will work for the business scenario that we have just seen, where now what I've done is I've restricted it to one sold to party here rather than making it available for everyone, because this system is being used by a lot of people. I don't want all the sales order with low margin to go through approval process. But the idea here is simply show you how it is flexible in terms of defining the workflow and then releasing that order. Now, the sales order that we created earlier, as you can see, because I'm the approver for that sales order, has come to me for approval, and I can simply look at that and send it back to the person who created it, given that the margin is low. We are not really making a lot of money on this. I can request the rework by the sales representative in this case, or if I'm happy, I know Discount Factory is a large customer. We generally do not make a lot of money on this customer. I can, if required, release the sales order. So both the possibilities are here. So I'm going to reject this and send it back so that the discount can be reduced a bit and we get 20% margin on this particular sales order. But that was how easy it is to control the margin on your sales order and ensure that your bottom line is intact.
Arshad, thank you very much. So maybe just to kind of summarize so I'm clear. So obviously, the solution that you've put in place there works at the header level of the sales document. It's leveraging workflow capabilities, which I think is nice in the sense that most managers would be familiar with my inbox and the approval process. The internal sales rep also, when he puts in that sales order with that low or high discount that yields a low margin, he can already see that it's going to go to approval to his manager. So he has a way also to control whether he does want to get that discount or not. The custom logic that you've also leveraged showed us that it's fairly easy to read the pricing conditions and have your own algorithm or equation to determine how the margin is going to be determine and against what you're going to be controlling it, seeing as you had that additional piece of customizing that was done in the pricing procedure. Did I get that kind of right? That's
absolutely
how it works?
correct. All the steps were summarized correctly, Pascal. Quick view of because that sales order was rejected. We can see the sales representative who created that sales order got notified and he was told to rework on it. He can see whether he wants to rework or say rework not required. So those options are available. He can also see the comment that came from the manager who was going to approve it. And this is how they can work in a seamless manner without having to go through emails or without having to go through phone calls in order to ensure high profitable business.
So increase in productivity. So that's check, full marks on that solution. That's a great solution. Really like it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pascal.
All right, so I will start to share my screen. All right, so as I said in the introduction, Harshad kind of had a bit of a solution on this particular engagement, and I came up with a different way of doing this very same process. So again, I'll show you directly what the process looked like with my solution, and then we'll work through the detailed steps of how to achieve it. So I'll be using the old GUI transaction, if you like, that has been Fioriized, VA01 create sales order. And the only reason I'm going to show it this way is because the message in this particular app is much more explicit than with the Fiori app. With the Fiori app, I could use it as well. It would work as well. But in that case, the message is just going to be an incomplete procedure, but it would still work. So I'm going to go ahead and create an order type of type OR, standard sales order. I'll be putting in my favorite sold to party. I've indicated my favorite customer. I'll put in a quick customer reference, and I'm going to indicate the product that I am selling. And then we'll go on to the pricing conditions. So similar to the process that Harshad showed you, we have in this case a product that we're selling for $26. We have a tax that has been calculated. We have an internal cost price of $11.57, which means that this particular order is yielding at this point a margin of 55.5%, which is good. We're making good money on this particular order, and no messages are appearing. However, I'm in my capacity as a sales representative, I'm going to be giving my customer a discount. Or ideally, I would like to give him a discount. And I'm going to add a new pricing condition, and we'll go and add a discount of type YK07, customer discount. And I'm going to be super generous today. I'm going to say that I want to give this customer a discount of 90%, for example. But what we can see is that the margin of my order is just terrible. And what we can also see is that as a result of providing this terrible discount for my customer, I'm getting this message here, which is check the margin of your order. And if I wanted to save this particular document, the system would use the typical incompletion procedure method to let me know that that's a no-go. This sales order is not going to be able to be saved in that particular state. So if I go to edit, it's telling me there is an issue with pricing. So I'm just going to say, okay, I'm going to go and complete the data, and I'm going to be a little bit more reasonable, and I will give my customer, let's say, a 10% discount, which is going to reduce my overall my sales order item margin down to 50%, which is still good and is acceptable. As you can see, I'm not getting any kind of message warning me that the margin is too low. And if I now go on, I can save my document because the document is now flagged as being complete. This incompletion fault has been resolved, so I can go ahead and save it. So it's a little bit different to the way that you did it, Harshad, in the sense that I'm not using workflow. This is much more interactive with the person actually entering the sales order. And a big difference already that I can see with the method that you chose is that I've got no workflow here. So I'm not going to involve any manager. The salesperson is going to be completely autonomous in the sense that we are hard enforcing this margin here. This order will not go through until he removes the discount or increases or reduces the discount so that the margin is acceptable.
No, that's a good approach, Pascal. So what this as well does is it tells you at the line item level where we do not make enough money, which is not what we can do on the sales order with workflow, what we saw earlier. This is a different approach, but definitely you are stopping it from happening even before it hits the sales manager, or this guy who is adding the discount can control it at his level.
Correct. I think for me, the highlight already there, so to speak, is that it shows that SAP S/4HANA Cloud is flexible. There is different ways of achieving an expected or desired outcome, and no one is forcing one to do one thing or another. So similar to you, I'll kind of walk you through some of the things that I've done to implement this particular solution in this particular way. So what I'm going to start off with is a little bit different. I'm going to go straight to the custom logic, because what we are going to be doing is we are going to be leveraging the alternate price condition amount calculation method. And we're going to start with the custom logic, and we'll work our way through up to the pricing procedure. So let me go to the custom fields and logic app. And as you can see, we're already there, and I have created a custom logic. And if you wanted to start this from scratch, if you had not done this before but wanted to follow along, what you would do is you would click on the plus icon. In terms of business context, we would pick the pricing context, which is again a little bit different to the one that you had in yours, because I think in yours we had the sales document header, if I'm not mistaken. And then in the baddie description, we have different baddies available depending on whether we want to put in a requirement that a condition has to fulfill at the document header or item level, or whether we want to introduce an alternative calculation method to calculate the amount at the header level or the item level, or the base value at the item level. In my case, what I did was I picked the define alternative calculation of condition amount at the item level. So I'm just going to press on cancel, and we'll go straight into it. Similar to the example that Harshad had shown you, if you're looking for inspiration, you can click on example, and there is some sample code that will be given to you as a starter to start your own logic. So there are a certain number of programmatic commands that you have to abide with, but the logic is essentially here where we try. And we're saying that the condition amount is equal to the net amount plus the amount, the tax amount. So this is the standard default example code. In the code that I used, so I leveraged what was there as well. And what I have done is again, to achieve the margin, I've made the assumption that the margin is very simplistically going to be the net amount minus the cost amount. So I'm calculating this amount right here, and I've also indicated I've hard-coded the margin to be 30%. So as soon as my sales order item is going to be less than 30% margin, that order is going to be flagged with this error message that we saw, which is check the margin of your order. And the rest of it really is just the same standard code that I took off from the example. So now that we have done this particular code, there's one thing that you must not forget before you leave the baddie, is you have to, in the filter, you have to click on the plus icon and give this filter, this formula a name. And this formula name is important because we're going to be leveraging that name in the pricing aspect of our sales order. So again, don't forget to give it a name before you leave this particular screen. So now that we've done the logic, so we've essentially irrespective of any sales order or the sales area, we've just created this logic. We haven't said anywhere that it's linked to a pricing procedure or pricing condition. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to go to configure your solution. And for that, we are then going to go in the pricing. And in the area of pricing, there's a couple of areas we want to go into. The first one is the adapt the pricing process by implementing routines, because that's essentially what we've done with the use of the baddie. We've done an alternative calculation logic, and what we now need to do is we need to declare that logic in sales and distribution. So as we have done an alternative for the calculation of condition amount, it stands to reason that we go and configure this particular aspect. And all that we have done here really is we have added an entry. We've called this condition amount. We've given this routine number a number, and this is also important in the sense that it needs to be in a customer namespace. There are certain numbers that are reserved for SAP, but this is a number that can be used by customers. And if I then delve into the details of this particular entry, you'll see that this is where we have now referenced that formula, that logic that we saw a couple of seconds ago. So again, I've added this entry, condition item amount, it's a baddie, and the YY1 margin control is that formula name, that filter name that I had given when we were adding that custom logic. So now we're getting closer. We've said that this is an alternative method of calculating the condition amount. We've said that this is the logic that should be used to calculate this alternative condition amount. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to reference that in our pricing procedure. So let's go one step back. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to go to the other area of pricing, which is price management. And here we are going to, for our pricing procedure, so we'll go to set pricing procedures. And I have a pricing procedure that I've been using, which is this one. And what we've done here is if we go down to the bottom, you can see that we have here referenced the alternative calculation method for condition amount that we had defined in the previous step. And this is that number that I said needed to be defined in a customer namespace. Also, for the sake of clarity, you will see that I've added a pricing condition. There's nothing really extraordinary about this pricing condition. The only reason I've added this condition, and I've defined it as a normal pricing, sales pricing condition, but reference it as a percentage because I wanted to be able to show a percentage and not a dollar amount in my sales order. So that would become evident for the person entering that sales order that it was the percentage margin and not an amount. So that's really it. So again, to maybe kind of summarize, like we did for yours, this is a method that works at the item level. It's a hard enforced rule. It doesn't go through an approval process. It's very binary. You either get that margin or you don't. It doesn't require a approval. The internal sales rep or the person entering that sales order will get that message directly. And that kind of summarizes that particular method.
That's a smart way of controlling the margin at the entry level itself. Thanks, Pascal.
Right. So then there's also one thing that I know we discussed as well, which is that this provides a direct outcome, and it's going to work well if you have a very hard and fast enforced rule that this is going to be the margin. But we know that businesses, they need flexibility. It's not always one hard set rule. There's always exceptions because potentially due to currencies in a multi-country organization, it could be that in one country, the margin to be respected is 20%. In another country, it's going to be 40%. It could also be that we want to authorize better discounts or to go below certain margin for certain customers, but not other customers. It could also be that you've got promotions where you want to get rid of an item, and for those cases, you wouldn't want to go below the margin. So I think it's also important to stress that SAP S/4HANA Cloud can very flexibly adapt to those situations as well. And obviously, customers could code these rules in the same way that we've done it by resorting to ABAP coding. But it's not very flexible, right? Because every time you have a change, you're going to need to have a programmer to come in and change your logic. And it's not really a business way of going about it, I would say. I would say that if these are business rules, then it's the business that should be responsible for maintaining them and making decisions on them. So Harshad and I thought, well, we can use a custom business object to input those business rules. So let's not worry about custom coding this or have a very flexible way of coding these business rules. So what we've done in this particular method here, what we've done is we've created a custom business object. And again, we've tried to be very simple because we can't cater to all scenarios, but this is a very simple custom business object, which is made up of just a couple of fields, which is the sales organization and margin. And the scenario here would be to say, well, if we are going to enter a sales order in that particular sales organization, then we want that margin to apply. And if we're going to enter a sales order in that other sales organization, then a different margin has to apply. So as you can see here, these are really the two functional fields that are going to need to be input by the business. So once you've created your custom business object, as you know, when you save it behind the scenes, S/4HANA Cloud is also going to generate a CDS for it, a core data service that you can query. And you can even, if you wanted to, expose that that core data service as an OData service, so you could update those business rules from outside, from a third-party system. So once you've done your custom business object, you would go to the UI that is also going to be generated in the background seamlessly for the business users. And as you can see here, this is the functional business rule. Just like you would enter a sales order, a business person would then be able to say, okay, for sales organization 1710, the margin is 32%. For 1010, it's 35%. But you can also imagine here that, as we've said, you could have the product code, the customer code, maybe a date validity, because potentially you would, between two dates, be running a promotion and you would want for a margin to be less than usual. So it really is going to be up to you to decide what fields are going to make up your business rules so that they can then be added in your custom logic. So we've got our custom business object, but we then need to revisit the custom logic to be able to actually leverage this particular custom business object that we've created. So for that, we'll go back to the custom logic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a draft. I have a code that I've already prepared and cooked. So let me just go in here. I'm going to select all of my code and paste in the code that have been prepared before. And as you can see, we're still kind of on the same way of determining the margin, i.e., we are still looking at the cost and the net amount to determine what that percentage is. But this time you can see that we have taken away that hard and false binary rule of 30% or nothing. And what we're doing here is quite different in that we are now going to say, well, go into that custom business object by reading its CDS, which is YY1 margin allowance rules, which is also the name of our custom business object. And we're saying, read a margin and put that into this variable Z margin, where the sales organization corresponds to the sales organization of my sales order item in my sales order. So as you can see, we're no longer hard coding anything here. It's very flexible. And if the business rules change, then the custom business object gets changed, not the code. So it's very flexible. Once we've done that, of course, then we would save our draft. We would publish it. Published, okay. And there we go, Harshad. So when we now create a sales order, we no longer have this binary hard-coded rule. We'll just read off the custom business object. So we can have different rules that apply to different businesses, to different scenarios. And it's very flexible for a business person to maintain.
This is awesome. This means we don't have to call for a programmer every time the change needs to be done. This also means we have different rules for different countries of different organizations. And Pascal, is it correct to say we can use the same business object, custom business object in the workflow as well and use the same logic to read the margin rather than hard coding it in the workflow?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the example that you showed where you had your custom logic, it could very well hook into that very same custom business object. I think that's also important to highlight. You made a good point there, because it could be that a customer that is interested by what we've done here might, in some cases, say, well, for this particular scenario or particular business, I want to go down the workflow route. And for this other business, I want to go down the hard enforced item route. And they could both use that same custom business object. So yeah, spot on. That's a good point to make, Harsha.
That's amazing.
All right. So anything else you want to add before we part ways?
No, thank you. Thanks for highlighting and enlightening us with the different ways in which we can achieve the outcome that customer would like.
Well, look, I want to thank you as well for jumping in and being positive and enthusiastic about doing this collaboration today. I love the T-shirt, by the way. And
thank you, Pascal,
hopefully,
for sending it.
and hopefully, this is the first of many other recordings. To the subscribers, listeners, if you like this recording, please do give us a thumbs up. Let us know in the comments what you liked, what you didn't like, so that we can keep on improving and making the next video better. And if you do get to use any of the methods that we've presented, then again, also in the comments, let us know how you're using it, how it is fulfilling a particular need in your business. So until next time, stay safe.
Thank you.